Imagine this. You walk into a room you used to belong to, friends, family, co-workers, people you've known for years, but now something's changed. They smile, but it's tight. They laugh at your insights, but the laughter feels forced. And when you speak about something real, about pain, truth, meaning, you can feel the room tilt, like your presence just made everyone a little more uncomfortable. They don't say it out loud, they won't confront it directly, but deep down you can feel it. You've become something they don't recognize anymore, and maybe even something they fear. You didn't become rude, you didn't attack anyone, you just started thinking differently. Stopped playing along, broke the script, stopped nodding to things you don't believe in. You stopped pretending to be smaller than you are. That's when it begins, the subtle shift, the silence, the side glances, the jokes that feel more like warnings. You've changed. You think too much. Not everything has to be that deep. They say it like it's a flaw, like it's a phase, like your clarity is some kind of mental illness. But you know what it is? It's growth. And growth terrifies people who've built their lives around staying the same. Here's the paradox no one tells you. The more mentally clear you become, the more isolated you'll feel. Because you're no longer available for the games. You're no longer addicted to the noise. You're no longer waiting for permission to be yourself. And that's the most threatening thing a human being can do, to exist on their own terms. So let's ask the question no one dares to ask. Why does building a strong, independent mind make people uncomfortable? Why does self-possession feel like rebellion? Why is it that the moment you stop conforming, even quietly without drama, the world treats it like an act of war? Could it be that your strength isn't the problem? Could it be that your strength reveals their weakness? Nietzsche once said, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe." And maybe you're feeling that now. That tension, that loneliness, that weight in your chest when you start to speak your truth and realize no one wants to hear it. They don't want your mind, they want your obedience. But something in you refuses to shrink again. You've tasted what it's like to think for yourself, to sit in silence and actually hear your own thoughts, to stop performing, to stop apologizing for existing with depth. And now? You're not going back, even if it cost you comfort, even if it cost you company, even if it cost you everything. Because what you're building is rare, and rare things are never welcome in places built on routine. So here's the real question. Are you willing to keep going, even if it means walking alone? Are you ready to build a mind so strong, so grounded, so dangerously free, that it makes people question their entire lives just by standing next to you? Because if you are, this won't be easy. But it will be real. And when you're done, you won't need anyone's permission to exist again. We're going into the fire next, into the part no one teaches, the part most people avoid their whole lives, why this happens, where it comes from, and why the world wants you weak. Let's get to the root. Why does building real strength, the kind that doesn't flinch, doesn't bend, doesn't beg, shake the world around you? Why does mental independence feel like betrayal to the people closest to you? Why does clarity make others flinch? Here's the raw truth. Because most people aren't living. They're surviving inside a script they didn't write, written by school, religion, tradition, social media, family expectations. It tells them what to believe, how to act, what success looks like, what failure means, and who they're supposed to be, and they follow it. Not because it feels right, but because thinking for yourself is terrifying when you've never done it before. That's what Nietzsche saw more clearly than anyone. He didn't just criticize religion. He wasn't trying to be edgy or provocative. He was sounding an alarm. God is dead. What he meant was this: the system, the comfort blanket of external meaning, is gone. The illusions we built around faith, morality, and identity, they've collapsed. And now, you're on your own. There's no divine hand guiding you, no pre-written meaning, no should, no rule book, just chaos, just the abyss. And one terrifying freedom: you are now the creator. That kind of freedom isn't peaceful, it's violent, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to question everything. Why do I believe this? Who gave me this idea of success? Is this my dream or someone else's expectation? This is the psychological rupture, the great unlearning, the breakdown that has to happen before the breakthrough. But here's the catch. Most people don't want freedom. They want comfort. They want the illusion. They want someone to tell them what's right and what's wrong, who to be, how to live, what to think. because it's easier to follow a map than to become a compass. That's why when you start creating your own values, when you stop asking for permission, when you stop following the tribe, you stop being safe. You become dangerous, not violent, not reckless, but unpredictable, because you're no longer driven by fear or guilt or approval. And that, to the average person, feels like rebellion, because they've built their lives on external scaffolding. If you tear yours down and stand firm, you prove they didn't have to live that way either. You become a threat to the lie they've wrapped their life around. Nietzsche saw this as the crisis of modern existence. We killed God. We destroyed the illusion. But we didn't replace it with anything real. We're walking around with full access to our minds, but no instruction manual, total freedom, and no will to use it. That's why people fall into groupthink. That's why they latch onto trends, ideologies, and algorithms that tell them how to feel. Because it's safer to conform than to create. And this is where it turns inward. Your mind, if left unclaimed, becomes a battlefield. The voice of society fights the voice of your soul. The need to fit in fights the need to be free. The mask fights the mirror. And the longer you avoid this war, the weaker you become. Because what isn't faced rules you. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the repressed parts of you you've been trained to hide. Your anger, your ambition, your hunger for truth, your need to be alone, your refusal to conform. You buried them to fit in, to be liked, to stay normal. But all that energy doesn't disappear. It festers, and eventually it turns into resentment, depression, addiction, burnout. Because you were never meant to live someone else's idea of who you should be. So what do? You stop hiding from the chaos, you go toward it, you look it in the eye. Nietzsche believed that only through chaos do you find clarity. Only through destruction do you create something real. You don't fix your life by patching it with affirmations. You tear down the whole structure, and then you build from truth. That's what he called the will to power. Not domination over others, but sovereignty over yourself. And that's why a strong mind terrifies people. Because it's not just intelligent, it's free. It doesn't beg, it doesn't imitate, it doesn't apologize. It exists on its own terms, and that kind of existence exposes everything false around it. That's the hidden reason people pull away. It's not about you being too much. It's about them seeing how little they've become. So now we've uncovered it. The real reason your strength disturbs others is because they built their lives around avoiding the very thing you're becoming. You are stepping into a world most people don't even know exists. And in that world, you'll face something even more brutal than rejection. You'll face the cost. Because a mind that's strong doesn't just lose people. It loses illusions, comfort, certainty. And that's what we're going to face next. The unseen consequences, the quiet punishments, the emotional weight of becoming who you really are. You've started waking up. You've begun thinking clearly, seeing through the noise, refusing to play along. But what no one tells you is this: clarity has a cost. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, it's quiet. It's the slow distancing, the awkward silences, the shift in energy you can't quite explain, but you feel it. You start to notice that your presence doesn't comfort people anymore. It confronts them. Not because you've become cruel, but because your truth highlights their lies. This is the part of the journey where most people turn back, not because they aren't capable, but because they weren't ready for the loneliness. See, when you start thinking independently, you unintentionally threaten everything others use to feel safe. Their opinions, their beliefs, their routines, their excuses. And instead of reflecting on themselves, most people react by pushing you away. They don't say that you're right. They say, you've changed. Or worse, you think you're better than us. And just like that, you become the villain in someone else's story. But here's what's really happening. You're no longer easy to manipulate. You stopped reacting the way they expect. You don't validate every complaint. You don't nod to every shallow opinion. You don't perform for approval anymore. And that messes with people, because your strength reveals their dependency. Your stillness reveals their chaos. Your peace reveals how much they've outsourced theirs. This isn't just philosophy. This is brain chemistry. Your nervous system is evolving. You're not chasing dopamine from fake validation. You're not addicted to the social feedback loop. And the more you pull away from the noise, the more your brain starts to detox from the constant stimulation. But that detox, it doesn't feel peaceful at first. It feels like withdrawal. Here's what you start to experience: restlessness in stillness. Because silence used to be filled with distraction. Now it's filled with you. Emotional disorientation. You don't know what you want anymore, but you know what you don't. people disappearing, some fade, others lash out. But either way, you're left with fewer hands on your shoulders and more space around you. Moments of deep guilt for saying no, for setting boundaries, for not replying right away, for protecting your peace. This is the unseen layer, the psychological toll of choosing truth over fitting in. You didn't expect to lose your tribe, but it's happening, and it hurts more than you want to admit. The irony? Most of them never knew the real you. They knew the version of you that was digestible, agreeable, accessible. Now that you've removed the filter, they don't know what to do with you. And for the first time, neither do you. This is where the self-doubt creeps in. Am I becoming cold? Am I just pushing people away? What if they're right about me? But those aren't signs you're wrong, they're signs you're shedding. Shedding the roles, the masks, the obligations, the quiet betrayals you used to commit against yourself in the name of belonging. You are not becoming cold, you are becoming clear. Nietzsche wrote, "The snake which cannot cast its skin has to die." And that's what this phase is, a psychological skin shedding. But the danger is real. Most people don't survive this part. They go back. Back to the fake friendships, back to the distractions, back to the easy life that asks nothing of them but silence and obedience. Because being alone in your truth feels unbearable at first, until it doesn't. And here's where the trap reveals itself. You weren't just trying to evolve, you were trying to evolve without upsetting anyone. You wanted to grow and still be liked, to be free and still be approved of, to be honest and still be applauded. But that's the lie. You can't have both, because the people who loved your mask won't love your face, and the systems that benefited from your silence won't celebrate your voice. So now you stand at a crossroad. Go back and be accepted, or keep going and be free. It's not an easy choice, but it is a necessary one. Because what's at stake is your identity, not the one they gave you, the one you're finally beginning to build for yourself. And this is the moment Nietzsche prepared us for. The moment when everything external breaks and something internal starts to awaken. Not a belief, not a theory, but a force, a kind of power that doesn't yell. It just is. And once that power begins to rise, you realize this wasn't a breakdown, this was a rebirth. But first, you have to stop running, stop apologizing, stop waiting to be understood. And that's what we'll talk about next. The rebellion. The moment you stop explaining yourself and start owning yourself. This is the breaking point, where most turn back, where fear tightens its grip, where comfort calls your name in the voice of old friends, old habits, old roles. But if you're still here, if you haven't run, then something inside you is ready to rebel. Let's make something clear. This is not the kind of rebellion you were sold in movies. It's not loud, it's not glamorous, it's not about proving anyone wrong. This rebellion is internal, brutal, quiet. And it starts with a decision so small no one sees it but you. I'm done living for the approval of people who never knew me. That's the beginning. The day you stop apologizing for your clarity. The moment you stop flinching when someone misunderstands you. The second you realize you don't owe anyone your availability, your silence, or your performance. You stop being reactive. You stop defending. You stop over-explaining. You just stop. And in that stillness, you start to hear something new. Your own voice. Not the programmed one. Not the one shaped by fear or trauma. The real one. The one that's been buried beneath the layers of should, must, be nice, and don't make it awkward. The one that doesn't seek permission. The one that doesn't apologize for needing solitude, clarity, space. The one that says, I will not betray myself to keep you comfortable. That's rebellion. That's freedom. Not the kind they sell you, where you follow your passion or live your truth for the sake of Instagram. Real freedom looks like this, saying no without a 3-paragraph explanation. Leaving a conversation that insults your intelligence, ignoring a text that drains you, walking away from a relationship that needs your submission to survive, choosing discomfort over dishonesty. It's walking through the fire of isolation and coming out the other side, clean. Nietzsche didn't believe in soft evolution. He believed in destruction first, tearing down what's false to build something real. That's what he meant by will to power, not dominance over others, but full authorship over your own existence. To him, the highest act wasn't obedience. It wasn't even success. It was self-overcoming. Become who you are. That was his challenge. Not be yourself. That's weak, passive. Become who you are. That's war. You have to face everything you've avoided, all the masks, all the stories, all the soft lies you wrapped around your potential just to stay loved. You have to burn them, all of them. And then in the ashes, you begin. This rebellion doesn't make you popular, it doesn't make you comfortable, but it makes you sovereign. And here's the hard part. You don't get to keep everything. You'll lose people. You'll lose comfort. You'll lose the version of you that made everyone else feel safe. But in return, you gain presence. The kind that makes a room go quiet when you enter. Not because you're loud, because your spirit is no longer diluted. You stop chasing connection. You stop begging to be seen. You stop reaching for the hand that only reaches back when you're easy, because you finally realize you were never too much. They were just too small. The world will resist this version of you. They'll say you're cold. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you intense, difficult, hard to be around. Good. Let them. Because behind every insult is an unspoken truth. You're making me confront parts of myself I've spent my whole life avoiding. This is how the Übermensch, the higher self, emerges, not as someone who dominates others, but as someone who has mastered themselves. No more begging, no more justifying, no more shrinking, just presence. A presence so rare, so undeniable, it unsettles everyone still addicted to their own false identity. So here's the challenge. You've broken away. You've felt the silence. You've started saying no. Now what? Now, you keep going. You stop asking what the world wants from you, and you start asking, what do I want from the world? You start walking, not for validation, not for applause, but because every step forward in truth is a step away from who you no longer are. And soon, you stop needing the world to see you, because you've finally seen yourself. No masks, no filters, no fear, just you, in full. And that right there is when you become dangerous, because now you are ungovernable. But here's what no one warns you about. Even this power, this clarity, comes with a final cost. One truth still waits at the end of this road. One truth that changes everything. And once you see it, you'll never be the same. That's what we'll face next. The ultimate truth. The insight that haunts. The revelation that liberates. The thing no one dares to say out loud, but once heard, cannot be forgotten. Here it is, the part no one prepares you for. Not the books, not the podcasts, not the mentors. They tell you about growth, about confidence, about finding your voice. But no one tells you the full truth, not the pretty version. The final one. You build this strong mind, you cut the lies, you shed the roles, you say the thing no one else dares to say. You walk away from noise and step into silence, and there in that silence you expect peace, a reward, some feeling of arrival, but instead you find it, the loneliness of the free, not the loneliness of being unloved, not abandonment. It's a different kind of loneliness, the kind that comes when you're no longer tethered to illusion, when your self-worth no longer hangs on a string pulled by others, when you don't belong anywhere because you finally belong to yourself. You don't feel above others, you just feel distant, like you're watching a play you no longer want to act in. And the moment you fully understand this, something shifts. You don't want to go back. But you can't move forward the same way either. That's the paradox of awakening. You're free, but there's no crowd to celebrate it. You're clear, but clarity doesn't always comfort. You're strong, but the stronger you become, the less you need. And needing less means having fewer attachments, fewer people, fewer places that feel like home. This is the price of becoming unbreakable. You lose access to the things that once pacified you. Empty praise, shallow connection, comfortable lies. They don't feed you anymore. They offend you, because you've tasted something deeper, and now everything else feels counterfeit. Nietzsche understood this. That's why he didn't just talk about freedom. He talked about the weight of it. He knew that once you become your own authority, once there's no one left to blame, no higher power to lean on, the full responsibility of your life falls on you. No gods, no saviors, no excuses, just you. And the question, what will you do with all this freedom? See, freedom isn't just the ability to choose. It's the burden of knowing you can't hide anymore. And once you reach this point, this high, cold, clear point, you realize something devastating. You can never go back to the version of yourself that needed saving, not because they were weak, but because you've outgrown their pain. And this right here is the ultimate truth. No one is coming, and no one has to, because the person you've been waiting for, is the one you're becoming. You are the answer. You are the guide. You are the source. And if that terrifies you, it should, because it means the illusion is dead, and now, finally, you are free. But it's not just freedom from others. It's freedom from yourself, from the self you created to survive, the one who smiled to be liked, who stayed silent to stay safe, who made themselves small so others could stay big. That self served a purpose. But now, that self is dead, and in its place stands something terrifying, not to you, to the world, a human being who cannot be controlled. You are now the mirror, the reminder, the proof that more is possible, and the world will either reject you or be reborn because of you. Either way, you don't bend. So now what? Now you walk. Not fast, not loud, but sure. You don't owe explanations. You don't chase closure. You don't need applause. You just exist fully, completely, without compromise. And that presence, that is the threat. That is the power. That is the gift. You are no longer available for anything less than truth. You are no longer digestible, predictable, or dependent. You are not part of the herd. You are not a product of the system. You are not playing the game. You are the exception, the anomaly, the one who walked through the fire and didn't just survive, you stayed awake. So if you've made it this far, don't ask what comes next. You do. You come next. The rarest kind of person. Not just awake, but unshakable. And yes, that will terrify people. Good. Let it. Because now you're the thing they said didn't exist, and the world has no idea what to do with someone who's truly free.